In October of 2008, a woman in Columbus, Ohio, contacted a paranormal researcher named David Holloway. Her father had died 3 weeks earlier in the small town of Wooster. He had been 71 years old. He had been alone. She sent Mr. Holloway a leather photo album, a single sepia portrait, and a journal. The journal covered 7 months, every entry faithful. Every morning, the same bench. And one final entry, written the night before he died. What follows is reconstructed from that journal, from Mr. Holloway's interviews with the daughter, and from the few details that could be confirmed in public record. Some names have been changed. Some things could not be explained at all. Welcome to the unseen hour, where the truth is darker than you think. Raymond Keller had been a mechanic for 43 years. He had calloused hands and a quiet voice, and a wife named Marjorie who had died 2 days before Christmas of 2007. He did not do well after. His daughter Karen, who lived 3 hours away in Columbus with 2 children of her own, came up for the funeral and stayed a week. When she drove home, her father was still wearing the same flannel shirt he had worn the day Marjorie died. He stood in the driveway and waved until her car turned the corner. Then he went inside and sat in Marjorie's reading chair. He did not get up for a long time. That was January. By March, he had stopped answering the phone. He ate when he remembered to. He did not remember often. He was 71 years old. He had not cried in 6 months. Across the street from his house, in a pocket park barely bigger than a backyard, there was an iron bench. It faced a small pond that froze over in winter and caught the first light at dawn. Marjorie had liked to sit there in the warm months with her crossword. After she died, Raymond began sitting there in the cold ones. He would wrap himself in her old wool coat, the one that still smelled faintly of her, and he would watch the sun come up over the water. Sometimes for an hour, sometimes longer. He wrote in his journal on the 14th of March 2008, "I do not know what I am doing out here. I do not know what I am doing anywhere." 4 days later, he was not alone on the bench. She sat at the far end of the bench with perhaps 2 feet of iron between them. Raymond noticed her dress first. It was long, dark, with small pale flowers scattered across it, and a high collar buttoned close at the throat. Over the dress, a gray wool coat that did not look store-bought. Her hair was pinned up in a style he could not have named. On her lap, a folded white handkerchief with something embroidered in the corner that he could not quite make out. She was younger than he'd expected. He could not have said what he expected. He was a widower sitting alone on a bench at dawn. He had not expected anyone. She said, "Good morning." Her voice was soft. There was the faintest lilt in it, Pennsylvania Dutch maybe, though he had never heard an accent quite like it. Raymond said good morning back. That was all that first day. She was there the next morning, and the morning after. By the end of the first week, they had exchanged names. She said hers was Eleanor. She did not offer a last name. He did not think to ask. He wrote in his journal, "Met a lady on the bench. Nice enough. Quiet. Dressed like my grandmother used to dress. Does not seem to need anything from me." Over the weeks that followed, they began to talk. Eleanor asked about Marjorie. Not the way strangers ask, not with that careful, tiptoeing sympathy that had made Raymond want to punch a hole in the funeral home wall. She asked as if she already knew her. What did she like to cook? Did she laugh easily? Did Raymond keep her chair in the reading corner, or had he moved it? He told her everything. He had not talked about Marjorie to anyone in weeks. Eleanor listened. She said once, "She sounds like a woman who was well loved." Raymond had to look away. By May, he was eating again. By June, he had called Karen back. By August, he had started his tomatoes late, but he had started them. The sessions on the bench, that was how he thought of them now, became the structure of his day. He woke at 5, he made coffee. He crossed the street at 5:45. Eleanor was always already there. He never saw her arrive. He never saw her leave. He wrote one evening in July, "Funny thing, Eleanor never drinks anything. No coffee in her hand, no water, even on the hot mornings. I asked her once if she wanted me to bring her something from the house. She said, 'That is very kind. I find I do not need much anymore.' I have been thinking about that sentence for 2 days." He wrote another night in August. "Eleanor said something strange this morning. I mentioned we had a cold snap coming, and she said, 'Not like we used to have. Nothing cold the way it used to be.' I told her last February had been 17 below. She just smiled and said, 'A long time back now.' She cannot be more than 30. I do not know what winters she is remembering." He did not know what winters she was remembering. He did not ask. October the 11th, 2008. A Saturday. Cold, clear, dew still on the grass. Raymond crossed the street at 5:45, as he always did. The bench was empty. He sat down anyway. He waited. He waited an hour. He waited another. At 8 o'clock, his neighbor from 2 houses down came walking past with her beagle. Raymond had known Linda Corwin for 25 years. He called out to her, "Linda, the woman who sits here with me in the mornings. Have you seen her?" Linda stopped. The beagle sniffed at the base of the bench. "What woman, Ray?" "The young lady. Gray coat, long dress with flowers. She's here every day." Linda looked at him for a long moment. "Ray, I walk Rusty past this bench twice a day. Every day. Have for 15 years. I have never seen anybody on this bench with you. Just you." Raymond thanked her. She walked on. He could feel her looking back at him before she turned the corner. He sat for a long time after that. The sun climbed. The dew burned off the grass. At some point, without meaning to, he looked down. The bench was old cast iron, painted black, but the paint had worn through in places to show the rust beneath. On the arm nearest him, a small brass plaque had been bolted to the iron. He had sat next to it every morning for 7 months. He had never once read it. He read it now. "In loving memory of Eleanor Keller, 1899 to 1924. She loved this park." He did not move. He did not speak. He read the name again and again. Eleanor Keller, his own last name. The dates. 1899 to 1924. He stood up. His legs did not feel entirely like his own. He crossed the street. He went inside. He sat in Marjorie's chair. He did not call Karen. The next part of the story comes from the journal entry he wrote that evening. His longest entry, 4 full pages, written in a hand that grew shakier toward the end. He wrote that he sat in Marjorie's chair until the room went dark. He did not turn on the lamp. He did not remember thinking anything in particular. Eventually, he did not know the time, he got up because he wanted Marjorie's good wool sweater. The green one. The one that still smelled of her when you buried your face in it. He thought it was in the bedroom closet. He was wrong. It was in the hall closet, on the top shelf, where they had kept Christmas decorations. When he pulled down the sweater, he pulled down a box with it. The box hit the floor and opened, and a leather-bound photo album slid out onto the carpet. He sat down on the floor next to it. He had not opened that album in 20 years. His grandmother, Adeline, his father's mother, the one who had raised him for a time when he was small, had given it to him for Christmas in 1988. She had died the following April. She had been 92. He opened the album. The first pages were the oldest. Adeline as a young woman. Adeline on her wedding day, 1942. A stiff little bride who was not smiling, because nobody smiled in wedding photos back then. Adeline holding his father as a baby. Adeline as an old woman in her kitchen, apron on. The last photo ever taken of her. He turned back to the front of the album. 3 pages in, before all the others, was a single sepia portrait. Formal. A photographer's studio. A young woman in a high-collared dress scattered with small, pale flowers. Hair pinned up. Hands folded in her lap. A small smile. A white handkerchief, folded, held against the dark fabric of the dress. He had seen this photograph 1,000 times growing up. It had hung in his grandmother's parlor. She had told him, many times, who it was. My mother. She died the day I was born. Her name was on the back of the portrait, written in his grandmother's old, careful hand. Eleanor Kellerly. Eleanor Keller. 1899 to 1924. Raymond sat on the floor with the album open on his lap for a very long time. The dress was the dress. The handkerchief was the handkerchief. The face. The face was the face he had been looking at for 7 months and had somehow never truly seen. And at some point, he wrote in the journal that he did not know when exactly, he remembered something his grandmother had told him, once, in her kitchen, when he had been perhaps 8 years old. He had not thought about it in 63 years. He had forgotten he had ever heard it at all. My mother never got to meet me, Raymond. She died the day I was born. But my father used to tell me, he used to tell all of us, that she had made him a promise before she went. She said she would not leave. She said when each of her children's time came, she would be the one to come for them. She said she would not let any of us cross alone. He had smiled at his grandmother. He had said, "That's a nice story, Grandma." She had looked at him. He remembered it now. He could see her face. And she had said, I used to think it was just a story too. When I was a girl, I stopped believing it. And then I got old. And now, I'm not so sure. Eleanor had died in 1924, in childbirth, at the age of 25. She had never grown old. She had never grown anything. She had come to him the same way she left. Raymond wrote in the journal that evening, "I have known my great-grandmother for 7 months. I did not know who she was. She has been sitting beside me every morning, in the dress she died in. She has listened to me talk about Marjorie. She has heard me say things I have not said to my own daughter. She has been kind to me. She knew my name before I told her." I think Marjorie saw her too, at the end. The nurse at the hospital told Karen that Marjorie had talked in her last 2 days about a young woman in a long dress, sitting in the chair by the window. Karen thought she meant one of the student volunteers. There were no student volunteers on that floor. Grandma said her mother promised to come for her children. But what about her grandchildren? What about their children? I am not afraid. I am writing this down because Karen will want to know. I am going to the bench in the morning. If there is time after, I will call her. Raymond. Raymond Keller was found on the morning of October 15th, 2008, by Linda Corwin, who was walking her beagle past the pocket park across from his house. He was sitting on the iron bench. His hands were in his lap. His eyes were closed. The medical examiner would later say it had been peaceful. A heart, 71 years old, simply finished. There were 2 impressions in the dew on the bench, one where Raymond sat, and one beside him on the other end, where someone had been sitting recently enough that the dew had not yet returned. Linda Corwin told the police this detail. The police wrote it down. They did not include it in the report. Karen drove up from Columbus that afternoon. She went into her father's house. She found the album on the floor of the hall. She found the journal on the kitchen table, open to the final entry. She also found, on the arm of the bench, when she went outside one last time before the undertaker came, the small brass plaque. It had been newly polished. The brass shone. The letters stood clear. She asked later at town hall who maintained the plaque. She was told there was no record of any plaque on any bench in any of Wooster's parks. The town had not placed it. The Parks Department had no file on it. Nobody knew when it had been installed, or by whom, or why. It had, as far as anyone could remember, simply always been there. Karen Keller kept her father's journal in the drawer of her bedside table. She told Mr. Holloway that she has read the last entry many times. She will not tell anyone, including him, what she sometimes thinks about when she reads it. Her mother, before she died, had spoken of a young woman in a long dress, sitting in a hospital chair by the window. Her grandmother, Adeline, had told her once, when Karen was perhaps 6 years old and her grandmother was very old, about a young woman she had seen in the garden when she was a girl. A woman in a dress that looked too old-fashioned even for 1932. A woman with a folded handkerchief. A woman her father said was not there. Karen has 2 children. They have children of their own now. Sometimes when she drives home from visiting them in Cleveland, Karen takes the long way, the back roads, the old road through Wooster. She does not stop at the little park across from her father's old house. She does not look, but she slows down, every time. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to The Unsee.